The world today is continuously changing at a rapid rate, so by 2050, imagine a completely different geopolitical world. With some countries stronger than others, there might be nations that will no longer exist, perhaps due to political changes, or maybe even climate change. Some things are sure. Overpopulation is certain, which means more famine, more pressure on food resources, more wars, and fewer natural resources. So which countries will dominate the world stage in the middle of the 21st century? Number 10, Germany. By 2050, Germany will be the only European country included in the 10 strongest world powers. Why? Because European countries report low growth, and this trend is expected to continue, as well as a decrease of an already extremely low fertility rate. The European population is currently shrinking. Of the 80 million Germans in 2020, by 2050 there will be less than 70 million, including the 1 million refugees that Germany will have received. Europe will become a less economically powerful continent with less influence in the world, its only representative being Germany. The massive migration of Africans to Europe and Muslim immigrants is what will increase the European population and not their fertility rates, meaning that by then, Europe, and Germany especially, will be much more ethnically diverse. Number 9, Nigeria. For the first time, an African country will surpass a European power in terms of economics. Nigeria will be the undisputed power of Africa, with more than double its current population. They will have 400 million inhabitants, making it the fourth most populous country in the world just after the United States. Nigeria is already the largest economy in Africa, but by 2050, it will be among the 10 world powers. This will truly be an amazing leap, showing that Africa will be a continent of emerging powers. Nigeria is currently an extremely young country. The average age of Nigerians is currently 17 years old. In comparison, the average age of Latin America is 25, and in Europe it's 45, which shows that Nigeria will be a strong power for decades to come. Currently, it is the richest country in terms of production, but the country suffers from high rates of poverty. The country's oil resources give them an economic boost, and they are even the world's 12th largest producer of oil, surpassing countries like Mexico. The current poverty rate of Nigeria is currently at 33%, which some organizations have referred to as unacceptable for the most powerful country in the African continent. Number 8, Russia. Russia was never the same after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Yet, in 2050, it will be one of the 10 strongest world powers, but not at the level of a superpower as previously expected. Russia currently has problems in growing its population. It is estimated that the Russian population will be reduced by more than 30 million by the middle of the 21st century. By then, China will have surpassed Russia militarily, so Russia will no longer be a direct opponent of the United States, since in fact, the United States will no longer be the first or second world power. Russia by then will have exhausted its vast oil reserves. They would still retain some of their gas reserves, but Russia's importance will no longer be as significant. Russia currently has strategic geopolitical importance for its military power and oil and gas reserves, which will provide energy and heat Europe in the winter. But by 2050, there will surely be new forms of alternative and renewable energy that will have replaced oil and fossil fuels. Number 7, Japan. This Asian country has managed to continue imposing itself among the most powerful countries in the world, but not to the same extent as before when it was the third world power. The reduction of their population, in addition to decades of stagnation, recession, and little economic growth, it will take its toll on Japan's economy, which will continue to be a highly developed and industrialized nation, but it will not have the same influence as it does now. Of 125 million inhabitants, Japan will have less than 100 million by then. A terrible figure for an economy as competitive as the Japanese. At this point, a significant portion of their working population will be over 65. This is dangerous since there won't be enough people in the Japanese labor market. This will also exert pressure on young people who will be a minority of society, just like their society before industrialization. But in spite of that, Japan will maintain its strong and dynamic economy. They will at least remain within the top 10 most powerful nations on Earth, unlike other countries such as France, the United Kingdom, or Italy. Number 6, Brazil. The current strongest power of Latin America is Brazil. It will also be one of the most industrialized and powerful countries in the world by the middle of the 21st century. With a considerable population increase, they will jump from 200 million to 225 million by 2050. This population growth will help to boost and push the Brazilian economy, taking advantage of the fact that the majority of the Brazilian population is relatively young, with an average age of 27 years, but not as young as compared to other Latin American countries. For its immense territory, population, and economy, Brazil's involvement in world affairs will give them more power in regards to matters concerning the entire continent of South America. Some years ago, it was predicted that by 2050, Brazil would establish itself as the fourth world power, but its economic and political crises has led the country into a recession that by some estimates will last 2 more years. Therefore, its projections have been reduced considerably. By 2012, Brazil had already surpassed the United Kingdom and was the 6th world power, but its crisis had relegated Brazil to their current 9th position. Number 5. Mexico. By 2050, Mexico will be the most powerful country in Latin America. Its economy will be among the most dynamic, industrialized, and prosperous on the planet. The explosive growth of its population will be more than 160 million. Mexico currently has the fastest population growth in Latin America, adding more than 40 million people to its population. Coupled with the migration from Central America and the Caribbean, Mexico will have power to decide on matters of global importance, and its voice will be heard worldwide. By 2050, Mexico will be rivaling its northern neighbor, the USA, in terms of size and economy. While the United States will have a larger economy, Mexico will no longer be in an unfavorable position. At that time, both countries will be at similar levels of development, and there could be more favorable and reciprocal trade conditions between the two countries. The massive migration of Central American immigrants will cause Mexico to establish a migratory border post to prevent waves of undocumented immigrants. In 2015, Mexico deported more illegal immigrants than the US, which shows that by 2050, when Mexico becomes the main destination for millions of people from different parts of Latin America, they will have to establish stricter immigration control. Number 4. Indonesia. Indonesia is the most unexpected out of this list, a country that many took for granted. It is already within the 15 most powerful countries in the world currently, and it will dethrone many countries on this list and take 4th place by 2050. This transformation is due to several reasons, but its main reason is demographics. Indonesia currently has 250 million inhabitants, a very populated country, and is currently the 4th most populated nation on Earth. It will fall to 5th place by 2050, but Indonesia is still expected to grow by 60 million by then. It will only be surpassed by Nigeria with their explosive population growth. By 2050, Indonesia will be the main power of Oceania and will maintain its position as the country with the largest amount of Muslims in the world. In addition, by 2050, Islam will be the world's largest religion. Indonesia will not only be a major country economically, but religiously as well. However, population isn't everything. For example, Nigeria will have doubled its current population, but they will still be in 9th place. On the other hand, Indonesia has set in place many key reforms to modernize the country in terms of infrastructure, industrialization, education, and even their armed forces. This will help the country to be among the 5 most powerful nations in the world. Number 3. The United States. The current and only superpower in the world will no longer be alone in the next half-century. The US will surely continue to be a country that is undoubtedly powerful in all aspects, economically, militarily, and politically, but it will no longer be the sole superpower. By 2050, the US will have a population of 400 million inhabitants, adding 80 million to their current population, but not by birth rate, but by immigration. In 2050, there will be more than 110 million Hispanics in the United States, which will represent more than 25% of the US population. There will also be migration from Asia, especially from China. Given the importance of Hispanics in the country, and Mexico being of the same socio-economic status by that time, there will be a freer movement of goods, services, and people. By then, it is highly likely that there will have been a Hispanic or Latino president. The influence and power of the US will be challenged by China, which will surely surpass the US in economic size and military power. Therefore, there will be a strong friction in the East between China and the United States' close ally, Japan. Number 2. India. India will be the most populated country in the world, surpassing China with a ridiculous population of 1.7 billion people. Accumulating almost 18% of the world's entire population, 1 in 5 humans on Earth will live in India by 2050. Currently, India is already one of the fastest growing countries in the world. In fact, in 2014, India surpassed China as the fastest growing economy. India, just like China, will have an explosive and continuous growth due to its large workforce. The country will be so diverse that it will become a melting pot of cultures, religions, and ethnicities, becoming the most multi-ethnic nation in the world. In 2050, India will be the country with the largest number of English speakers in the world, surpassing the US. Currently, it already has one of the most powerful armies in the world, so it is safe to say that by 2050, given the importance of its economic and political weight, it will have a military rivaling that of the United States or even China. India managed to become China's continental rival, but at the same time, these 2 Asian countries will undoubtedly make Asia the most important and powerful continent in the world by 2050. Number 1. China. Currently, China is the second world power, but only economically. Militarily, they are currently in third place, but by 2050, things will be different. China will be the world's leading economic, military, and political power. They will dominate the world economy and will even have the most powerful army in the world, equivalent or beyond that of the United States. China will be the only country on this list that will climb in power despite having a reduction of an estimated 100 million inhabitants from now until 2050. And there are several reasons for this. China had implemented the single-child policy, so couples could only have one child between them. But this was just recently abolished when the Chinese government realized that they had an aging population and this could potentially dampen China's growth. The average age of the Chinese is 37 years old, which is neither considered young or old. China is also known as the factory of the world, which is exactly the reason why they have deplorable environmental conditions. Breathing the Beijing air for one day is equivalent to smoking 25 cigarettes. Currently, China is growing at a rate of 6%, but this is a reduction from the previous 10%, so we can see that their rate of growth is slowing. But currently, China is transforming from a manufacturing economy into a service-based economy based on domestic demand. So with all these major changes by 2050, it's hard to imagine how the world will be by 2100. It will truly be amazing to see current emerging countries such as Mexico, Brazil, Nigeria, India, and Indonesia develop, imposing themselves as the most powerful nations in the next 50 years. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this every week. See you next time.